Hey guys, before we get started, I would like to say that there are some trigger warnings. There is death of children in this, along with a pregnant woman. There is narcissistic behavior present, and also some really terrible details about the death of these people. So if you are triggered by any of that, feel free to not watch this video and go search some of the other true crime things that I have on my channel. Hey guys, it's ayebeepee and we are here to talk about Chris Watts today. Probably the most hated man. I can't think of anyone I hate more right now. And I wanted to cover this case just because it's so important to see how a family who seemed so happy and collected and perfect can have issues, and that you have to pay attention for narcissistic behavior. Watch your friends and watch the relationships they're in. Don't ever just assume everything is going to be okay if there's a rough patch. Alright, so let's start by talking about the family. There was Chris, who was 33 years old at the time. Once they moved to Colorado, he got a job with Anadarko Petroleum, and he was known to be a really good dad. He was always there for his kids and loved them deeply. Then there was his wife, Shanann. She was 34 years old, and she worked for the MLM business Thrive. She was very successful and pretty high up, and she was even doing so well, she won a company car. This nice Lexus SUV. She was very active on Facebook due to selling Thrive, and she wasn't shy at all for the camera. But Chris did seem to be the introvert of them two. He just was not as comfortable. They had two daughters, Bella, who was 4, and Celeste, who was 3, and they called Celeste Cece. And Shanann was actually pregnant at this time with their son Nico. And from the outside looking in, they just seemed like a very happy suburban family. To get into how they met, in 2010, Chris had sent Shanann a friend request. She didn't ever really assume they were going to meet, but she accepted it anyways because she thought he was attractive. They lived in North Carolina at the time, and they ended up meeting. Shanann had just recently gotten divorced, but that did not stop them from dating for about 2 years. On November 3rd, 2012, they did end up getting married. In 2013, they had moved to Colorado for a job opportunity. Shanann did work for a children's hospital at the time, but she ended up staying home with the kids because she did suffer from lupus and she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And at the same time, that is where Chris accepted his job at Anadarko Petroleum. December 17th that year is when their first little girl, Bella, was born. In June 2015, though, the family did end up having to file bankruptcy. They just had extremely way too much credit card debt, student loans, and medical bills. They had a $3,000 mortgage and a $600 car payment every month at this time, and it took up almost all of their monthly expenses. But the Homeowners Association did end up suing them for unpaid HOA fees, so they were starting to have a little bit of financial difficulty. In July 17th, 2015, that is when their Celeste was born. And at the beginning of 2018, that is when Shanann found out that she was pregnant again. She ended up telling Chris on a Facebook Live, but I have to say, it's really weird the way he reacted. In June 2018, though, he ended up meeting a woman named Nicole Kissinger. She also worked at Anadarko. She was in the environment department, which means she oversaw all the operators, which Chris was one of. He ended up just going to her office and introducing himself one day. And on June 14th, he had saved Nicole's number in his phone. By July 2018, Chris was seeing Nicole 4 to 5 times a week. The physical relationship also started this month between them. He told Nicole that he was almost through with a divorce process process with Shanann. And at this point, Shanann and Chris were having a really hard time. So Shanann had ended up taking the girls to North Carolina to visit family to have some time apart. When Shanann did this though, this is when Chris told Nicole that the divorce was final. But neighbors claimed they heard Shanann and Chris screaming at each other in their driveway the night before she left. July 4th, Nicole went to Chris's house for the first time. She had said that it was only to discuss like his diet and weight loss and workout journey, but he ended up fixing her lunch and she left after she ate. And July 7th is when their first phone call was on file, and Chris's phone pinged off of 3 different towers this night. July 14th came around and there was 4 missed calls from Shanann. She had just kept calling throughout the day. All went unanswered but one, which only lasted about 1 minute. But we now know this is the day that Chris brought Nicole to the Shelby American Car Collection Museum, so it makes sense on why he never answered Shanann's calls. On Shanann's phone records though, it shows that she had been texting her friends that they were starting to have trouble. She had said Chris was ignoring her, he didn't want to sext or talk dirty or even seem sexually interested in her anymore, and she just knew something must be going on. And this night is when Chris told Shanann that he did not want to be together anymore and that he didn't want this baby that was coming. But Shanann suggested marriage counseling. Chris completely turned it down though and said he just wanted out. So on July 18th, Chris and Nicole share a lot of naked pictures with each other. He had downloaded an app that let you save pictures, but it hid it by looking like a calculator app. He then was saving all the photos to that app. By July 24th, Nicole's Google history starts, and let me tell you, this is the messiest Google history I've ever seen, ever. Nicole Googled this day, "Man I'm having an affair with says he'll leave his wife." And it's not just hers that is damning, because on July 25th, the next day, Chris was Googling when to say I love you, when to say I love you in a new relationship, and how do you feel when someone tells you they love you. Shouldn't he know that from being with Shanann, at least? July 28th, they stayed at the Great Sand Dunes National Park. Shanann and the children were still in North Carolina, and Chris was just refusing to communicate with them. July 30th, though, he gives Nicole a love letter that he wrote because he was soon going to be flying to North Carolina. July 31st, Chris flies out, and texts from Shanann show that Chris was being very distant and almost cold to her, and that there was major tension between Chris's parents and Shanann. On August 2nd and 3rd, Chris was constantly switching pictures to this hidden app, while the family was reporting that he was being very distant and cold and just on his phone the whole time. So August 4th at 12:45 a.m., Shanann texts Chris explaining that he did not stand up for his family when his parents were trying to feed Cece something she was allergic to. He just said he'd do better, but honestly, he pretty much blew it off. So at this point, his parents refused to come to Cece's birthday party, all over this disagreement. And I can't imagine how these grandparents feel knowing now that they chose to miss the last birthday party of their granddaughters. And while all this was happening with Chris's family, Nicole was searching wedding dresses. She was also searching Chris Watts, trying to find his Facebook, and Shanann Watts, trying to find hers. On August 7th, Shanann texts her friend saying that Chris is terrified of this new baby and said that he was just happy with the girls. Her friend reassured her that everything was going to be okay. He's just worried. Just give it time. But August 8th rolls around and it was her 15-week appointment. They had a gender reveal party planned this day, but ultimately Shanann just ended up canceling it. She said that her and Chris were just not compatible anymore and said he had no interest in her and he refuses to go into counseling. And while this was happening, Nicole was Googling marrying your mistress. And while she was Googling that, Shanann was texting her friends that she didn't want to be a single mom and she can't afford to be a single mom. And she just really wanted to make it work. She loved Chris. Shanann then found a marriage counseling book on Amazon, which she sent to Chris and asked if he would read. He said he would, so she ended up purchasing it. On August 9th, there was an ultrasound being done that Chris was just reported to be really cold during. Shanann was leaving on a business trip to Arizona this day, and she was just feeling really down and not well. Her friends reported her not being herself, but Shanann did write Chris a letter as like the last attempt to save this marriage. She told her friends that her and Chris had the best talk yet before leaving for this trip. But then Chris puts this really weird picture on Shanann's Facebook wall. Supposedly it was one of their daughters in a blanket, but I'm gonna be honest, it doesn't even look like a child. It almost looks like a Barbie underneath a blanket, but people have now wondered if that was a sign. On August 11th, Nicole was Googling once again, and she was Googling for how to prepare for anal sex, threesomes, and porn. Chris hired a babysitter and had said that he was going to go down to a baseball game with his coworkers, but really he was going out with Nicole. On August 12th, Shanann was sending a draft of a speech to a friend for them to look at that she wanted to say to Chris when she got home. So the whole time Shanann's trying to save this marriage, Nicole and Chris are just having a great old time. And on August 13th at 1:48 a.m., Shanann returns home. Her friend Nicole Atkinson drove Shanann home. And just to not get confused, I'm going to call Nicole Kissinger Nicole and this Nicole Atkinson. At 5:15 a.m., Chris claims he left for work and said him and Shanann did have an emotional conversation before he left. 5:30 a.m. though, Chris's truck was caught on a security camera on one of the neighbors' houses. His truck was backing up in the driveway, which was weird because Shanann did not like his truck in the driveway because it leaked oil, but he was caught taking 3 trips to his truck. But you couldn't see what he was putting in there or what he was doing with it. At 8:30 a.m., Chris calls the school and completely unenrolls Bella and Cece. And by 10:10 a.m., Chris was looking up the lyrics to the Metallica song Battery. Throughout the day though, Atkinson was texting Shanann, asking if she was feeling better, how her appointment went, and just pretty much checking in. Shanann was not answering at all though, which was weird because Shanann's whole business was from her phone, so she always had it on her. Atkinson and her son go to the Watts house. She knocks on the door and there's just no response. So she tries to open the front door, but there was an alert sent to Chris's phone from the security camera. Atkinson texts Chris and tells him that she's worried about Shanann, she's not answering her phone, and she's just trying to see if she's okay. He said that she told him she was going on a play date, but Atkinson could see the Lexus and the car seats in the car, so how was she supposed to go anywhere without her car or at least the girls' car seats? But it is shown that during this time, Chris was going through his phone and deleting anything that had to do with Nicole. But he then ended up having a 51-minute conversation with her on the phone. She claims at this time she had no idea his kids and wife were missing, and he never mentioned anything about it. So Atkinson goes back to the front door. She noticed that it was locked from the inside with like that chain, so there's no way someone could have left out that door and been able to lock it back. But this causes another alert sent to Chris's phone. So at this point, he told her she needed to leave the property now. Atkinson said she's going to call the police because she is really worried about Shanann. And Chris just tells her not to get them involved. She's on a play date. What are you so worried about? And at 1:40 p.m., Atkinson calls Shanann's doctor just to find out that she never showed up to her appointment. At this point, Atkinson decides to call the police and file a wellness check on Shanann. She tells Chris that she filed one, so Chris said he is going to come home. So the police got there before Chris and could not enter the house without his permission. So on the phone, they're asking about like the garage pin or anything like that that they could get into the house, and he's just making excuses saying, well, the password doesn't work for the garage pad. I'll be there in a second. Just don't worry about it. But when Chris gets home, he's just acting very casual, and at first just doesn't seem like anything happened. So he lets the police in his house and they completely search it. And at first they didn't really find anything out of place, but then they started noticing that Shanann's belongings were still at the house. Atkinson had found Shanann's phone shoved between the couch cushions, and again, Shanann would never leave her phone. But then they noticed that the bed sheets were missing from the girls' rooms and the master bedroom, and Shanann's wedding ring was on the nightstand, which she never took off. Chris does tell police that when she got home, they did get into a fight about their marriage. But then he woke up at 5 a.m. and just went to work. Shanann is now reported missing, along with the daughters. Shanann's phone, keys, and medicine for her lupus were all found in her purse in the home. And the next day, on August 14th, good old Nicole was Googling once again. She was Googling Shanann Watts, can cops trace deleted text messages, and how to get rid of text messages. At this point, Chris does a news interview pleading for his family's return. Initially, Shanann's mom told him not to do it because realistically, when people get on TV and beg for their family's return, they're just ripped apart and immediately be trying to find things that could prove that maybe they're guilty. And she truly didn't think Chris had done anything, so she didn't want him to go down in that scrutiny. But she says now she is so happy he did, because that made her truly believe and know that he was the one that harmed them. He just had this like weird snicker the whole time, and he was like kind of laughing and smiling. He was smiling during this, and he didn't cry once. The FBI did end up getting involved with this case, and police confront Chris about the affair. He denies it and says he wouldn't do that, but he did hear that Shanann was having an affair and that they had fallen out of love with each other and that the relationship just was not going well. So on August 15th, Chris fails his polygraph miserably. So then the police confront him. He still denies everything, but then requests to talk to his father. So when his father comes into the interrogation room, he does end up telling his dad that he hurt Shanann, but it was because she had hurt the kids. So the officers come back into the room and he tells this big old story. Said they had started to talk about getting separated and she was not happy about it. So he had walked into Bella's room to get away from her for a second and saw on the baby monitor that Shanann was strangling Cece and Bella was already on the ground blue. Chris said he blacked out in rage and strangled Shanann right then and there. He loaded them into his truck, brought them to his workplace, and dumped the bodies. There is really no reason to talk badly about the dead like this unless it's to try to hide something for you. So Chris was trying to be a hero in this terrible, horrific story. On August 16th, Nicole speaks with the police. She pretty much told them everything that they wanted to know about her and Chris's relationship, and then immediately starts Googling again. She Googled Amber Fry. Amber Frey book deal, Amber Frey net worth, and did everyone hate Amber Frey? Which, if you don't know, Amber Frey was the mistress in the Scott Peterson case. A coworker did turn in Chris's GPS on his truck, so the police took a drone to search the coordinates that the GPS told them his route was, and they immediately spotted bed sheets and ground that had been dug on. The girls were found in 2 separate oil tanks, and I have to say these oil tanks had a hole that was about 8 inches, and it was apparent that one of them didn't really fit. He had to shove her into this oil tank. And they were able to tell this by some of the hair being caught on the tank. And it seemed that they had been closed in this oil for about 4 days. The coroner's office determined that the girls were not strangled, so that didn't match what Chris said happened, that actually they were smothered. But the coroner did say that Shanann was strangled, and she was found in the fresh movement of the dirt on the ground. On August 21st, Chris was charged with 9 charges, 3 counts of first-degree murder, 2 additional charges of first-degree murder of people under the age of 12, unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with a body. On September 1st, there was a funeral held for Shanann and the 2 girls in North Carolina, where Chris was never mentioned once. So on November 6, 2018, Chris was sentenced to life in prison. The judge said this was the most inhumane and vicious crime he had ever handled in thousands of cases that he's seen. He issued him 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, 48 years for unlawful termination, and 36 years for disposing the bodies of his family. Shanann's parents then filed a wrongful death civil lawsuit against Chris. On December 3rd, Chris was then transferred to Wisconsin Correctional Facility due to safety reasons, and he has been on suicide watch almost all the time he's been in prison. And on February 18th, 2019, Chris confessed to killing his daughters also. He had a 5-hour interview in prison in which he went into the details of what he did to these poor girls. He said that he woke Shanann up while he was getting ready for work, and he wanted to talk about the marriage and their future. He had told her about the affair he was having with Nicole and that he wanted to end the marriage. Shanann then claimed that he would never see the kids again and just was very angry about him cheating on her and wanting to end this marriage for this other woman, which who wouldn't be upset about that? And he then strangled her. And just to pause on his story real quick, there has been thoughts that maybe this is not what happened, because people think that she would have had to have already been unconscious when he started strangling her, because there wasn't much sign of her fighting back for her life. So people have thought that maybe he did this while she was sleeping, or maybe somehow she was drugged when this happened. But back to his story. At this point, Bella comes in and asks, what's wrong with mommy? And Chris just tells her it's going to be fine, it's no big deal, while he wraps Shanann up in the sheet and takes her to the truck. He puts the kids in the back seat and drives to work. And just to pause the story to put it into a little bit more of a perspective, is that he laid Shanann in the back seat on the floor, and then his daughters were sitting in the back seat. So their feet would have been dangling or resting on their dead mother. When he gets to work, he smothers Celeste in the back seat and puts her in the oil tank. And this whole time, Bella's asking, are you going to do to me what you did to Sissy? Are you going to do to me what you did to mommy? And he then does the same with Bella. And if I'm not getting them confused, I'm pretty sure the autopsy showed that Bella actually fought. She tried really hard hard to get her dad to stop. And then he puts Bella into another tank and he buries Shanann's body nearby. And even though this was really hard to hear, the family was happy to finally at least have answers. And for the truth to be out that Shanann did not do this to her daughters. She loved her family so much. So for him to try to take that away from her when she can't even defend herself is disgusting. So on November 18th, 2019, the civil suit did happen. Chris was ordered to pay Shanann's family $6 million. $3 million for each of them that died and $3 million for pain and suffering. And the amount will grow with an 8% interest. And the family knows likely they won't see this money ever, but they did this to make sure that Chris could not profit off of their deaths for how large this case got. I mean, everyone pretty much knows who Chris Watts is. So they wanted to make sure he couldn't make any money off of this. And Shanann's friends did say they knew there was trouble in paradise, but they never thought they saw any signs for murder. And this is just absolutely nuts to think about because her whole life was on Facebook, and look at what was happening behind the scenes. He is a textbook narcissist, and he hid it so well for a while. And people talk a lot about how they think Shanann was annoying and they can understand why he wouldn't want to be with her and everything. But the fact of the matter is yeah, he could have been annoyed and not want to be with her, but he could have divorced her. He didn't have to kill her. How is that any type of defense? But yeah, that is me covering the most hated man in America right now. Chris Watts will die in prison. Prison might be full of people that made bad decisions, but they are very protective of children. Good luck, Chris. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe for me, and hit that notification button. That way you're notified the next time I upload. Check out the rest of my Crimetober series. And also go look at my Unsolved in West Virginia series because I worked really hard on it and I just love it. Comment below any details of this case that maybe I didn't have in here. There was so much I couldn't put everything in. And also comment below some other really fascinating cases to you that I can cover for things like vow and crime coming up. Alright guys, well, I'll see you next time. Bye!